Well, there hasn't really been any change other than my father received a biometric card, which is an indefinite leave to stay card, which is what he already had and was taken away once he'd gone to Jamaica on a holiday and then was not allowed back in the country.
That's the bit I remember. I'm just going to steer you back to that because that's the bit. That's why I remember your story so keenly. I mean, got to Jamaica on a break, on a holiday, and then got told he wasn't allowed to come home.
Yeah, absolutely. He was actually at the airport, so we knew nothing about anything. He was at the airport and wasn't allowed to board the plane and was told that he wasn't allowed back in the country because he'd had no status in the country, which we couldn't understand because he'd worked here all his life. He's had a mortgage here. He got married here. I was born here. So we couldn't understand it at all. And at the time, you feel that you're completely alone, even though I did go to our local MP at the time
yes.
and, try to contact as many people as I could, but just wasn't getting anywhere.
I mean, I don't want to use a glib phraseology or lazy cliches, but you must have felt as if you'd woken up in a parallel universe. A respectable, normal family. Dad goes on holiday and gets told he can't come home. And from what I know of your story, it was this notion, I think at the beginning, when you mentioned contacting your MP, I think you just presumed it would all get sorted quite quickly because it was so obviously not right what was happening.
Well, to be fair, my dad's quite a joker, so when he called and said they won't let me board the plane, at first I thought he was joking. I was like, what do you mean? You've just gone on a holiday. Well, why would they not let you board the plane? And then I spoke to Border Force, and then, they said, no, sorry, he's not welcome back in the country. He has no status been here. He's been out of the country for too long. And I'm thinking,
he'd lived here since 59, I think, hadn't he? He arrived in 1959 as part of the Windrush generation.
That's correct, yeah. He arrived here in 1959. He'd never worked in Jamaica. He'd only ever worked here. And paid all his insurances and his taxes, never ever claimed any benefits whatsoever, worked his whole life, and decided to go back and just build a house as well, and see if he could build a house and see if he could, just set up a family home for holidays for the family, and then to be told that he couldn't come back into the country. And like I said, we thought it was just a joke at first.
And when did you realise it wasn't? I mean, I know you realised that day pretty quickly that it wasn't a joke, but when did you realise that you were caught up in a big issue rather than just a little error of paperwork or a miscommunication or the message hadn't arrived in the right department? You were caught up in a major scandal. Well,
it wasn't until really a lot of people came forward, and David Lammy said what he said, that I realised there were so many people. At the time, like I said, I thought you just feel like you're on your own, and I did try to contact the local MP, and I got lawyers, and we went to the immigration here. My dad went to immigration in Kingston, I just said, I can't do this on my own, Dad. I don't know where else to go because I'm not getting anywhere, and there's no one to talk to, and everybody's if you like, pushing it under the carpet. So when it all came alight a couple of years ago, that's when I realised how many other people were in exactly the same position.
And then what happened?
Once all the media had highlighted everything, that's when my
because I sense we're not rushing at breakneck speed towards a happy ending here, Samantha. I don't think.
Well, I mean, my father, like I said, he's got the biometric card, which is an indefinite leave to stay, which is what he had anyway. But where we're at now is that we received a letter about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago now, that said he would not be able to apply for a British citizenship until he's remained in the country a further 5 years, because he'd been out the country for 8 years. Well, he'd been out the country for 8 years because you hadn't allowed him back in the country. So it wasn't a choice. So it was just, it was like literally a 360 going back to exactly where we'd started. But that's just an application. That's not to be granted citizenship, which is what, I believe Amber Rudd said that was going to happen at the beginning.
Well, that's what I thought. Yeah. And the last chap we spoke to, Ahmed, I don't know if you heard him, is in an identical situation to your dad as well, and has been given something that he's supposedly expected to be grateful for, but which, as you and he both described, was kind of just a confirmation of the situation you were in already.
Well, it's just a given. I mean, the indefinite leave to remain was something that was there in the first place. We haven't been given anything extra. Again, no apology, no compensation, not even a contact since receiving that letter to just say, once you've been here further 5 years. Now, bearing in mind my father's 84, and that's if he's still alive in that period of time.
How is he now?
He's fine. He's doing okay.
Good.
His health is not great, but he's 84. He's he's not long been had a pacemaker fitted because he has sort of lung problems and kidney problems. But he's doing all right, and he's such a jolly person anyway. But it's like it's just everything's no problem, and if it happens, it happens. But that's because that's the way he is.
Yes, of course. And what would you? I mean, if I'd spoken to you 2 years ago, when Theresa May inaugurated Windrush Day and people pledged that lessons would be learned from the report into the scandal, 30 recommendations were issued, a full review of the government's hostile environment policies was promised, and thousands of people were sacked from their jobs, denied access to the NHS, made homeless, arrested, deported. If 2 years ago, if we'd talked and I'd said, what do you think is going to happen next? What do you think you would have said?
Well, I finally thought that I believed what the government said,
right.
That all these people were going to be compensated for whatever their situation was. I expected an apology and I expected them to get the citizenship because that's what we were told. But then, right now...
It just hasn't happened.
I feel
and there's no explanation there's no explanation of why it hasn't happened. And so I suppose Dad's back. So major mission accomplished. Where do you find your energy? I mean, it's almost at some point it's going to feel like banging your head against a brick wall.
You are banging your head against a brick wall because we've not achieved a thing. We're nowhere further on than where we were 2 years ago when that situation arose.
And no prospect of improvement anytime soon.
Well, we haven't heard anything. I have not had any conversation with anybody once receiving that letter, which I think is appalling. That the fact it was just black and white on a letter. It's almost like, well, really sorry that you haven't had what you're supposed to have had in the last 8 years. And how do you tell someone that through your not seeing your family, not being able to come back to the country that you know is home? How do you compensate for that anyway? But even to have a conversation with somebody would have been nice, a face-to-face conversation. We apologise, Mr. Barnes, or, just to receive a black and white. And it was a bog-standard letter that had gone out to everybody, I'm sure.
It's hard not to think that they're just hoping you all go away.
Well, a lot of this generation are either going to pass, possibly before, very unfortunately, before it all gets resolved. And that's the saddest thing, is that some of these people, if they're not already, past, are of an age where every day is a bonus. Will they ever get to have that 100% happiness, which is what they were promised, which is rightfully theirs, to be citizens of the country?
Well, you do him proud, Samantha. I hope you'll allow me to say that. But obviously, everybody listening would wish that that this hadn't fallen to you. It's an astonishing story, and given that this is supposed to be, or 2 years ago today was supposed to be, as you say, the sort of beginning of justice being restored, or justice at least being introduced to the equation, it's just staggering that you still are so much in the dark, and yet that your dad has still not received anything like the apology or the compensation, which is, I know it can be a loaded word, but 8 years of your life stolen from you for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Again, I say to people listening, imagine how you would feel if it happened to you.